This is lecture 26. We're going to stay in the Jacksonian era, and we're going to talk about Cherokee removal. The context for this, probably the best context, is America's westward movement or manifest destiny, removing those obstacles from white Christian dominance of the country. Cherokee in this case, later Mexicans, as we push our way westward toward the Pacific. Another context is kind of a real estate context. When you think about clearing title to vast tracts of land owned by, or traditionally owned by, the Cherokee, we're clearing titles so that this land can be exploited in the South, especially for cotton cultivation. The significance here, I suppose the greatest significance, is this would, in the 20th century, in the 21st century, we would probably call this this removal of the Cherokee Nation, we would probably call it ethnic cleansing, whereby an entire group of people are collected and forcibly removed from their homelands, vast distances, to places they don't want to go. What I want to do here is give you the Cherokee argument for non-removal, the state of Georgia's argument for removal, and then President Jackson's arguments in this historical tragedy. The Cherokee arguments are very interesting. This case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And the Cherokee were very clever in their arguments in that they used arguments that they knew would appeal to white American courts, lawyers, and judges. I'm going to go through some of these arguments for you and listen for those factors that sound very much like English common law. Again, the Cherokee are very clever in incorporating these arguments. They say, quote, that the Cherokee had become a model of cultural assimilation. And you'll remember that from Thomas Jefferson to Andrew Jackson, there is this notion that the Indians have a choice between assimilation, becoming more like white Americans, or extermination. So the Cherokee say they become a model of cultural assimilation, that they had shifted from hunting to settled agriculture. This, of course, is one of the demands that we had made. That they had converted in large numbers to Christianity, another demand that we had made on the Cherokee to assimilate. That they had, in addition, adopted a written alphabet and had approved a tribal constitution that mimicked the U.S. Constitution. Yet all these adoptions and their insistence on maintaining their status as a sovereign nation only heightened Georgia's resolve to remove them. So the Cherokee have turned the Americans' assimilation argument back against them here. The Cherokees continue. They say they've been living on these lands that were derived from their ancestors, and they had a perfect right to continue to live on these lands in undisturbed possession of them. The Cherokee go on. They say that they have their own form of government, and this government is long-standing, and that they had never submitted themselves to the government of whites. And then they have a perfect right to retain their form of government. Cherokee argument goes on that the rights of their soil and sovereignty are inherent until the Indians voluntarily surrender them and cannot be taken away by contracts between communities of white people, contracts to which the Indians have no say. Again, these all strike right at the heart of these notions of Western property rights, common law rights, and the Cherokee are very good at turning these against us. The Cherokee go on. They say that at the foundation of the white argument is simple racial bias, that the whites are greedy, They want the Cherokee lands, and that they're going to devise arguments, valid or invalid, to try to remove them. One woman's petition in front of the Supreme Court says, quote, "This land was given to us by the Great Spirit above as our common right, to raise our children upon, and to make support for our rising generations. As the Cherokee Nation have been the first settlers of this land, we therefore claim the right of the soil." This woman's petition goes on, and here she addresses not only President Jackson, but presidents going all the way back to Jefferson. "Our father, the president, advised us to become farmers, to manufacture our own clothes, and have our children instructed in English. To this advice we have attended in everything as far as we were able. Now the thought of being compelled to remove to the other side of the Mississippi is dreadful to us, because it appears that by this removal we shall be brought to the status of a savage nation again. For we have, by the endeavor of our father, the president, become much too enlightened to throw aside the privileges of civilized life." This is just a remarkably strong argument. Not only have we assimilated, we have become Christianized, we speak English, we tend the soil, we've got our gender roles straightened out, we have become civilized, and now if you remove us to the other side of the Mississippi, we will revert to that savage state that we were in before assimilation. I can't think of a better argument than that. This woman's petition goes on. She says, quote, "We believe the present plan of the general government to effect our removal west of the Mississippi and thus obtain our lands for the use of the state of Georgia to be highly oppressive, cruel, and unjust. We sincerely hope that there is no consideration which can induce our citizens to forsake the land of our fathers, of which they have been in possession of since time immemorial, and thus compel us, against our will, to undergo the toils and difficulties of removing our helpless families hundreds of miles to an unhealthy and unproductive country." If you compare the terrain of North Georgia, Northeast Alabama, to Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Territory, where these people are going to be removed to, you can see what she means here by unhealthy and unproductive country. Now, the state of Georgia has arguments. Let me briefly go through these. The state of Georgia says, in effect, that the Indians, no matter how much they protest that they have assimilated, that they are fundamentally different. They are in the words of modern historians, the internal alien. They are the historical other. They are not like us, and no amount of assimilation can make them like us. The state of Georgia argues that gold is discovered in Dahlonega on Cherokee territory, and afterwards the state of Georgia declared that the Constitution and laws of the Cherokee Nation null and void. Here you see simple financial greed taking place. The state of Georgia argues that the Cherokee Nation blocks Georgia from its access to the Tennessee River. This in turn impedes Georgia's trade with the internal portion of the country, as the Tennessee River winds its way from northern Alabama northward to the Ohio and, of course, the Mississippi rivers. Georgia continues. They say that the economic and social order of the South is based upon a color distinction. Black equals slave, white equals free. Indians don't fit into these categories. They are neither white nor are they black. And this, of course, tends to confuse society's categories, and that for this reason the Cherokee should be removed. The Georgia argument continues by saying that the land owned by the Cherokee, portions of it would make good land for cotton cultivation. And this also is a good reason for the removal of the Indians. Now, President Jackson. Jackson's arguments, of course, will be the deciding ones here. Jackson's attitude toward the Indians is that of paternalism. He is the great white father. He knows best for the Indians and for the whites. And this is the basis of Jackson's arguments, that they should do as he says because he has their best interest at heart. I'm going to give you a short quote here from Jackson's State of the Union address in 1830. He says, quote, "The tribes which occupied the countries now constituting the eastern states were annihilated or have melted away to make room for the whites. The waves of population and civilization are rolling westward, and we now propose to acquire the countries occupied by the red men of the South and the West by a fair exchange and at the expense of the United States, to send the Indians to a land where their existence may be prolonged and perhaps made perpetual." Jackson's making the argument that the tide of white settlement moving westward is irresistible and that it will inevitably destroy Indian culture. Therefore, to solve this problem, he's going to remove the Indians west of the Mississippi so that their existence may be prolonged and perhaps made perpetual, as they cannot continue to exist in their present state east of the Mississippi. Jackson says he believes his Indian policy was, quote, "just and humane," and would leave the Indians free from the mercenary influence of white men. Again, there's a certain sense of inevitability about this, combined with Jackson's paternalism. And then finally, of course, Jackson uses a constitutional argument, which is very powerful and perhaps the clincher. Jackson says that the Cherokees' demand for full tribal sovereignty was unconstitutional, as well as unrealistic, since the Constitution stated that, quote, "no new state shall be formed within the jurisdiction of any other state without the approval of that state's legislature." Now, all you have to do is look at the map and see the boundaries of the states in 1832, and you can see that the Cherokee Nation occupies portions of northeast Alabama, North Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. If the Cherokee are going to try to maintain their argument that they are sovereign over this territory, then they are violating the Constitution by creating or maintaining a state that intrudes upon the boundaries of other states. The Indian Removal Act was signed into law in May 1830. It says, quote, "it shall be and may be lawful for the President solemnly to assure the tribe or nation with which the exchange is made that the U.S. will forever secure and guarantee to them and their heirs or successors the country so exchanged with them, and if they prefer it, that the United States will cause a patent or grant to be made and executed for them for the same, provided always that such land shall revert to the United States if the Indians become extinct or abandon the same." So we can see these tendencies at work: America's westward expansion, the notion of manifest destiny, the spreading cultivation of cotton, issues of sovereignty, and of course the Supreme Court quite famously ruled in favor of the Indians here. What was Jackson's remark upon hearing the court's decision? The court's made its ruling, now let it enforce it. And of course the court has no means, nor is it constitutionally delegated to enforce its rulings. That's the job of the president. And President Jackson, in this case, has no interest in enforcing the court's ruling. So the Trail of Tears occurs, and the Indians are removed. We'll tackle some other crisis of the Jacksonian era when we return. Thank you.